Hello everyone. Today we are going to discuss digestive system. In that first specific point, that is anatomy of digestive system. Myself, Dinesh Dangar. While considering to the digestive system, before proceeding ahead, we will discuss what is nutrition. It is a kind of process by which organisms obtain and utilize their food. Here, the role of digestive system is to provide that specific nutrition in specific format, or we can consider a kind of format like it could be a lipids, it could be a proteins, it could be amino acids, it could be a fats, it should be a triglycerides or fats. So while considering nutrition, it can be divided into two parts. First, that is ingestion, and second, that is digestion. Ingestion is a process of taking food into the digestive system so that it may be hydrolyzed or further digested. So first part is ingestion, second part that is digestion, where digestion involves the breakdown of food material with the help of chemically or mechanical method. Here, the breakdown of the food is required to utilize those specific nutrients which are present inside that specific material or a kind of food. So here, nutrition is required in terms of the growth of the human body. Types of nutrients. It could be micronutrients or macronutrients. Micronutrients involves vitamins, minerals and water, whereas macronutrients will have proteins, lipids, carbohydrate and other etc. Okay, here we will have a brief idea about human digestive system while considering the anatomy of digestive system. So it starts with the oral cavity. Here, oral cavity involves lips, teeth, tongue and salivary glands. Again, salivary glands involves parotid gland, sublingual gland and submedullary gland. Next part, that is pharynx. Next is esophagus or tube which carries food from the oral cavity to the stomach. Next is stomach, which is a J-shaped organ. After stomach, there will be a small intestine. And again, for the small intestine can be divided into three parts. First, that is duodenum. Second, that is jejunum. And third one, that is ileum. After that, we can see that large intestine. After the or at the end of the large intestine, there will be a rectum and the anus. Other than this, here we can see two specific sphincter, or while considering to understand it, we can consider it as a gate, right, which allows the food move in and move out. So here at the end of the esophagus, there will be a cardiac orifice, and at the end of the stomach and the starting of the duodenum, that specific joint will have a pyloric sphincter. Other than this, there will be a presence of appendix that is present just starting of the cecum or at the end of the small intestine. Other than the digestive system part, there are certain accessory organs. It could be a liver, pancreas and gallbladder. These three even helps in the digestion. Now we will have a discussion on each and individual segment of it. See here, while considering exam, that is GTU point of view, the diagram is even important, where we need to mention oral cavity, next is esophagus, stomach, small intestine, large intestine. Ingestion. So first, what is ingestion and how exactly it starts? So it starts with the mouth, where exactly mastication will be performed. Here, while considering oral cavity, right, or we can consider that this is the gateway or the entry point for the food material, and it generally opens externally through the upper and the lower lips. Here, this cavity will have a dome-shaped roof, and that dome-shaped roof can be called as a palate. Here, the hard palate it will be in the front, and soft palate will be present in behind, and which forms a an arc. And again, this arc with uvula that is hanging behind the center. Here, the major role of mouth, that is to mastication. What is mastication? Mastication is a part of digestion. That is what mechanical digestion, and for that teeth will help into it. Here, the major role of teeth, that is to breaking out the food, that specific bite, right, what we have consumed, that will be divided into small fragments with the help of teeth. What teeth will do? Teeth will undergo wearing and tearing of the food, and it will divide or break up the food or the specific bite what we have consumed into the smaller fragments. And again, there will be a saliva released with the help of those salivary glands, and this salivary gland will have to pass the specific food from the oral cavity to the small intestine, oral cavity to the stomach. Here, there will be a two type of mastication. First is mechanical digestion, that is with the help of teeth, and the second one, that is chemical digestion, where exactly saliva will help. What its saliva contains? It contains amylases, which digest the starch. Mucin, that is a kind of slippery protein or kind of mucus. Even this mucin will protect the soft inner linings of the digestive system, so there will not be any kind of abruption of the epithelial layer. It even lubricates the food so that that food can be easily swallowing, or it may reach to the stomach. It acts as a buffer, right? It neutralizes the acid to prevent tooth decay. It acts as a antibacterial chemical because it kills those bacteria which are entering into the stomach. Tongue. While considering tongue, its 1/3 portion will be attached to the base and 2/3 will be moving, which helps to move the food from the one segment to the second segment of the oral cavity, and with the help of tongue the saliva can be mixed with the that specific chopped or those breaking particle food. Here the tongue is at the base of the mouth, which is 1/3 lying in the front and 1/3 into the posterior cavity of the oral cavity. It is a kind of musculo-membranous structure with the presence of taste buds. Here we can see those taste buds on the tongue. First, or the tip will have a buds for the sweet and the salt taste. In between there will be a sweet base, next is for bitter taste, and both the sides will have a taste bud for the sour taste. It is a kind of mobile organ with tip, body, and the base. There will be presence of those taste buds on tip and the body, whereas base may not have any kind of taste bud. Teeth. Here we can see the structure of teeth, where the most outer layer, that is what enamel. After that there will be a presence of dentine. Third portion, that is pulp. Fourth, that is cementum. At the end of the cementum there will be a periodontal membrane, and at the last they will be supplied with the nerve and the blood. So here the total number of teeth will be 32. After into that 32 there are divisions, like 16 will be in a upper jaw and 16 will be on a lower jaw or the mandible. It will be available in curved form, and as we know that those all teeth may not have a same structure, because as we can see here in diagram, starting from the upper side, that is there will be a presence of those incisors, right, which break the food into the parts. Next, after that, there will be a premolars and the canine. Those premolars are generally used to press the food material, whereas molars will chop into the fine particles. As well as there will be at the end of that molars, there will be a wisdom tooth, and it cannot be seen in many a time. Here it will be available 16 plus 16 is equal to 32, and it will be available in curved form, which helps into the mastication, that is chopping of food or breaking out the food material what we have consumed in oral cavity. And again, that chopped material will be mixed with the food. So they are made up of the dentine, enamel and the cementum. Salivary glands. For salivary glands, you can refer a specific video what I have already uploaded in channel, that is Pharmacology Talks. Here three types of salivary glands will be present, that is parotid gland, submaxillary or mandibular gland. Next is the sublingual glands. Here, while considering parotid gland, as you can see in diagram, it will be present just below the ear in cheek, whereas sublingual gland will be present at the base of the teeth, and at the base of sublingual gland there will be a presence of submandibular gland. Parotid glands releases a serous type watery secretion, right? And the major component of it, that is xylem. In case of submaxillary or the mandibular gland, it will be present at the bottom and produces a mixed, that is serous and mucus secretion. Here serous is a kind of watery fluid, whereas mucus may have a little bit higher viscosity as compared to the water. Next is sublingual glands. It is present just below the tongue and at the base of the mandible, and it secretes a saliva that is predominantly mucus in character. So that specific mucus will have a little bit more viscosity or the thickness as compared to the water. So first, what is saliva? As we know that when food enters, or specific, the form will be bite. Once that bite will be entered into the oral cavity, it will be chopped or it will be breaked, right, or broken out with the help of teeth and the saliva, and further it will be added with the saliva, or saliva will be added into it, so that it can have a multiple advantages, like as we have discussed, it provides a lubrication, it provides a kind of we can say that, so that it can be easily swallowed up to the stomach. Saliva is a viscid watery fluid secreted into the mouth by the salivary glands, and that functions into the tasting, chewing and swallowing of the food, as well as it provides or it moistens the oral cavity, that is mouth, and the digestion of starch starts with the oral cavity itself with the help of saliva, and the component is xylem. While considering pH of the saliva, it will be ranging between 6 to 7, and it contains certain salts as well as sodium chloride, potassium chloride, phosphatases, next is lipase and the mucin. While considering functions of the saliva, there are many functions which can be performed by the saliva. It keeps mouth moist. In many a condition like a dehydration, when saliva released, when the amount of saliva that is liberated with the help of salivary gland may be reduced, and the dryness of mouth can be felt. So the first and the most important function, that is to keep mouth moist. Next, mastication. Actually, it is not responsible for mastication, but it helps in the mastication of food. The further use, that is the dilution. It dilutes the food material or that specific chopped material into the easily swallowed material. It removes microbes. Whether the food contains microbes, in those conditions, it can be removed from the oral cavity itself. Xylem splits starch into the maltose. Again, the maltose will get converted to the glucose. Excretion, again it helps into the excretion of certain kinds of materials. Again, it may help to what the maintenance of water balance inside the body. It acts as a buffer. So these are all the functions of the saliva. Next part in oral cavity, that is pharynx. As you can see here, the division in pharynx. There are three different parts in pharynx, starting with the nasopharynx, oropharynx, and the laryngopharynx, and that we have already studied during the anatomy of respiratory system. Here, pharynx will be present on the back of the throat. It is a passage for air and it will be closes when we used to swallow the fluid. Here, for that further epiglottis will help into it. As you can see here in diagram, the epiglottis, which is a dome-shaped roof, right? Whenever there will be entry of food, that particular food matter will closes it so that it further food cannot enter into the larynx. Here we can see that the larynx will be present on anterior side, whereas esophagus will be present on posterior side. Whenever we used to have a breathe, at that time that epiglottis will be in a straight form, whereas we consume food, that specific food material will pushes that specific gate, that is epiglottis, towards the downside, and it will be in a curved form so that that food material may not enter into the larynx. And their size could be 15 centimeter, and their division, that is nasopharynx, next is oropharynx, and the laryngopharynx. Next portion into the anatomy of digestive system, that is esophagus. Right, the esophagus is a kind of a cylindrical tube-like structure which helps to move food particles from the oral cavity to the stomach, and their approximately length could be 10 inches long, which even secrete mucuses. It moves food from the throat to the stomach using the kind of muscle movements, that is peristalsis. Peristalsis is a kind of movement which allows the entry of the food or a kind of transportation mechanism. Swallowing. For swallowing, responsible is epiglottis and the peristalsis. Epiglottis is a flap of cartilage. Whenever it closes the trachea, whenever there will be entry of food or the further food can be swallowed with the help of epiglottis. Food travels down the esophagus. Once there will be entry of or the closing of the epiglottis. Here, peristalsis is a kind of involuntary muscle contractions to move food along. Here, while considering peristalsis, a kind of mechanism which allows the entry of food into the esophagus from the one segment to the another segment. Here, while considering peristalsis, the food will be moved downside, right? Or that specific food may enter into the downside with the help of that specific involuntary muscle contraction. Here, this is how exactly we can understand the peristalsis. It will be in a form of wave, just like a sea waves. Here, we can see that there will be a series of involuntary wave-like muscle contractions which move food along the digestive tract. Here, we can understand that suppose food was in a starting condition. Once that specific bolus, right, it will be present inside the esophagus. It will have a specific segment involved into it. Along with that specific segment, further esophagus may undergo contraction and the relaxation, and that further contraction or the involuntary movements, right, moves the food from the one segment to the another. Stomach. Next important portion while considering the anatomy of digestive system, that is stomach. As we know that there will be a 2 points from where exactly food can move inside and move outside. Here it is a kind of, or we can say like a J-shaped organ or J-shaped hollow organ which may be lying on the abdomen under the diaphragm. Actually, the diaphragm is a roof abdomen, which will separate both the cavity, that is abdominal cavity and the thoracic cavity. Well, the thoracic cavity may involve the heart and the lungs, and after that there will be that diaphragm will be present, and next one there will be a abdominal cavity. Here we can see that its major part will be in a left of the midline, and further it distends when it is filled up completely. While considering its capacity, it could be of 1 to 2 liter of capacity, and it stores the food and the particular digestive material, and it helps into the digestion of material with the help of chemical method. Here, while considering chemical method, there will be a release of gastric juices and the further HCl, and that further HCl is a part of gastric juice, and it will be secreted over inside the layers of the epithelial tissues. Here, it stores food temporarily, right? And its mechanical digestion will be done by the gastric contractions, and further with cardiac and pyloric sphincters closed. As I mentioned earlier, there will be a two gates or the entry points. First is the upper one, that is cardiac sphincter, and the lower one, that is pyloric sphincter. Here we can see in diagram there will be a two curvatures, right? In those two curves, in that the lesser curve and the greater curvature. The lesser curvature will be in the inside, whereas the outer membrane will have a greater curvature or the greater curve. Here, that specific cardiac sphincter will not allow the food material to move from the stomach to the esophagus. Once there will be a starting of the mechanical or the chemical digestion inside the stomach, these two gates will be closed, so that we can easily understand that once the stomach is filled up, after that there will be a digestion, and up to the end of that specific digestion, these two gates will be in a closed condition. Once the digestion will be completed, at the end of or the lower end, that specific pyloric sphincter will get open, and the food material will be transported from the stomach to the small intestine. That is the first part, duodenum. Here we can see the anatomy of inner linings, and in that further we can see some those finger-like projections. These finger-like projections will increases the surface area of it. There will be a presence of mucus cell, as well as there will be the neck-like structure. There will be a presence of those parietal cells, chip cells, which could be responsible for the release of HCl, and further they are responsible for the absorption of food material from the stomach. There will be a presence of G cell also. There will be a presence of those glands, gastric glands, and they are supplied with the artery and vein. Next is, while coming to the functions of the stomach. While considering functions of the stomach, the major function is to store food temporarily, right? It won't store food material for a longer duration, but up to the end of the mechanical and the chemical digestion of it. Further, the food will be moved up to the small intestine for further absorption. Here, it produces the intrinsic factor, which is important in B12 absorption, that is vitamin B12 absorption at the small intestine. It digests protein, right? It digests protein into the smaller fragments. As we know that proteins are made up of amino acids, and here the further that proteins will be digested into their smaller fragments, that is amino acids. It controls the proper amount of food that is leaving the stomach for the small intestine. Once the activation of that specific pyloric sphincter, the food will propelled from the from the stomach to the small intestine, and it controls, or the specific food which is leaving the stomach will be controlled by the stomach itself. Here it is producing the hormone, that is gastrin, which helps in pepsin and HCl production in the stomach and bile production into the liver. It acts as a buffer or the buffering the food condition if it is too alkaline. So these are all the functions of the stomach. Here we can have a certain other functions like we can consider mechanical function of it, where it acts as a reservoir of the food, and which helps or the provide movement of the stomach, which helps in the mixing of the food material with the digestive juices, and further it liquefies and propels the food further into the duodenum. That is a part of mechanical digestion. We can consider, or we can have its secretion function, where because it releases the gastric juices into it. It provides antiseptic like hydrochloric acid, which is present in gastric juices, which could destroy, which can destroy the microbes, and further it prevents the infection, right? So it acts as a antiseptic. While considering digestion, gastric juices are responsible for that, and it partially digests the proteins and the fat material. Here, just what will happen, the larger molecules of the food material will be divided, or they break up, or they chopped out into the smaller molecules or smaller globules. While considering absorption, generally water, alcohol, glucose, and other certain drugs are absorbed here in absorption with that specific microvilli, or those villi present inside it, right? While considering excretion, even some toxins and drugs can be excreted out with the help of stomach. Gastric juices. While considering gastric juices, they are secreted by the stomach itself, right? Here, while considering the gastric juices, their pH would be ranging between 1.5 to 2.5, and the major component of it will be hydrochloric acid. So we can understand that the pH will be acidic, and the major role will be here with the pepsin, which is an enzyme that breaks down the larger proteins into the smaller fragments, that is amino acids. Food will be further broken down into a then it will be in a now liquid state, and it will be formed as it forms chyme. See, here there will be a certain new terminologies like while considering food, once we to consume, or the ingestion process may have a bite, right? The food will be in a form of bite. Now that bite will get converted into the bolus with the help of saliva and the teeth. So that bolus will enter. So one can understand that what we have consumed, that is bite. It enter into the oral cavity, it forms bolus. Now that bolus will be transported to the from the oral cavity to the digestive system, that is what the stomach. So up to that form, it will be in a form of bolus. Now further it will be diluted with the help of gastric juices into the liquid form, right? First the food was solid, next saliva was added, so it forms semi-solid. Now it will be in a liquid state, and that is termed as a chyme. While considering the phases of gastric juices, it will have a 3 phases, that is nervous phase, or we can consider it as the cephalic phase. Second, that is gastric phase, and the third one, that is intestinal phase. Here, in nervous phases, the secretion occurs, right? The secretion of gastric juices, right? So here, secretion of gastric occur due to the stimulation of vagus nerve. We have discussed about vagus nerve during the first semester and the second semester, that is cranial nerves, right? So here, that vagus nerve, while in gastric and the intestinal phase, the chemical substances like histamine and the gastrin, right? It acts as a stimuli for further absorption and the chopped out of the breaking out the food material. In gastric phases, further secretion of gastric juices takes place after or once the food, the entry of food into the stomach, right? And again, it will be due to the stimulation and the activation of the entry of food into the stomach. And generally, it will be done after, gastrin hormone. Once there will be activation of gastrin hormone after generally half an hour of it. Here, the gastric phase is the strongest and the longest of all the phases. Above these 3, that is nervous, gastric, and intestinal phases for the release of gastric juice. Out of it, the most potent one or the most longest one, that is gastric phase, because it is hormonal, right? It is independent of nervous control, and it may have a direct endocrine stimulation. So it is known as a when generally food enter into the duodenum, further secretion of gastric juice will be stopped. So up to which time gastric acid will be or gastric juices will be released. See, once that mechanical and the chemical digestion is completed, just believe that we had a food, and after that it depends on that specific time, right? It depends on the time up to which it take time for the further digestion or the absorption of food material, as well as the complete mixing out of the food material. If we had a fat or higher amount of carbohydrate, then it may require 2 to 3 hours for complete digestion of it with the help of gastric juices. So at the end of the 2 to 3 hours, up to that specific time, gastric acid or the gastric juices will be liberated. But once there will be activation of pyloric sphincter, and it will get activated and it will get open. So after that, there will be a complete cessation of that specific gastric juices, and it can be termed as a intestinal phase, where the secretion of gastric juice is inhibited by particular hormone, that is enterogastrin, and it will be secreted by the duodenum itself, and generally it will be passed into the blood and it takes through the stomach. Here, secretin, cholecystokinin, and the gastric inhibiting peptide, that is GIP, they are hormones that is secreted by the small intestine, and they all inhibit the gastric acid secretion. So further there will not be a release of gastric juices. Okay, next portion, or while considering the functions, yes, one thing what I wanted to discuss, that is the functions of the digestive system. Functions of the gastric juices. While considering the functions, the major role is that is those enzymes, that is pepsin with hydrochloric acid, which digests the protein into the peptone and the proteases, right? Remember, the proteins will get converted into the peptone and the proteases. Here, renin acts is on the milk protein, which is casinogen, right? What we used to have during food, that is milk, and in that there will be a casein protein or the casinogen, right? So it will get converted into the casein, and which is further digested by the pepsin itself, or pepsin. Hydrochloric acid, which carries the hydrolysis of the food stuff and also acts as an antiseptic material. And the last function of the gastric juice, it could be it excretes the toxins, heavy metals, and certain drugs like opium derivatives. So that is all about the gastric juices. Next point, that is small intestine. Generally, small intestine will be in a form of coiled up, or it will be in a form of coil. Again, it is a kind of tube structure only, or tube-like structure only, but it will be in a coiled up form, that is coiled up tubular structure, right, which consists of the generally 3 parts. Here, as we can see here in diagram, the duodenum, the first 10%, that is duodenum, next 20% could be jejunum, and remaining 70% could be ileum. So we can divide into 3 parts according to the anatomy and the physiology. Duodenum, jejunum, and ileum, they are different. They may have a different functions, right? In duodenum, next is jejunum, and the ileum, they have their separate role into the digestion of the food material. And now, while considering small intestine, it is the major portion where exactly all those food materials will get absorbed. Here, while considering their length, it could have a 5 to 7 meter, or approximately we can consider 6 meter of the length. Here, the most chemical digestion will occur, and not only digestion, absorption is also the important function for the small intestine, and it will have we can say that huge surface area, that is 300 meter square. While considering 300 meter square, we can understand like the size of the one tennis court or the table tennis court, right? So that is what is the 300 meter square. While considering structure, the duodenum, jejunum, and the ileum, the most digestion occur into the duodenum. In terms of jejunum and ileum, the most absorption of the nutrients and the water will be done into it. Duodenum, it is the first section of the small intestine. For in that we can see that acidic chyme, right, that acidic content of the stomach will enter into the duodenum with the help of that pyloric sphincter, and it mixes it with the digestive juices that is released from the pancreas, liver, and the gallbladder. Here, one can understand that the nature of the food which is entering into small intestine, that is acidic. Now here what will happen, duodenum, as you can see here in diagram, duodenum will have a opening for the bile duct, and this bile duct will carry bile juices, and bile juices may have or it may be formed with the help of bile that is present in liver, and it will be further concentrated into the gallbladder, and these two may have a common opening for the bile carrying duct, and further it will be filled up with the help of the pancreatic juices, and these three will have a common opening into the intestine where exhaled it is released. So it is the first portion, and we can see, as we can see here in diagram, it is C-shaped tube, right? It is a C-shaped tube with a descending part of the duodenum which contains even the opening of the pancreatic juice, and they may have a common bile duct. The bile will be secreted with the help of liver. The main function of the duodenum is partial digestion of food, and once that specific acidic chyme which may be formed in the stomach, it enter into duodenum, there will be opening for the bile juices, and now that bile juices will be mixed up with the that acidic chyme, and further the pH will be the food material, that is chyme, will be in a now alkaline. Here the most chemical and the most chemical digestion takes place here in cases of duodenum, and the simple sugars and the proteins are absorbed into the inner linings. Fatty acids and the glycerols generally go to the lymphatic system for further absorption, and it is lined with the villi, which increases the surface area for the absorption, and one cell thickness we can see here, and there will be a presence of those Peyer's patches. There will be a presence of those Peyer's patches, which is a part of our immune system. While considering jejunum, it could be a continuation of the duodenum, and generally it forms the 2/5 of the small intestine, right? Again, it is a coiled up structure which performs the peristaltic movement, right, as we have seen into the esophagus, and with the help of that peristaltic movement, it may starting from the duodenum, next is jejunum, and next is ileum, and once it enters into the small intestine, further there will be a peristalsis movement. And while considering duodenum, it is bound behind by a fold of peritoneum called mesentery, which carries the blood vessels. Again, surrounding of that specific coiled up structure, there will be a presence of one transparent layer, and that specific transparent layer can be called as a mesentery, which may have a blood vessels which is attached to the small wall of the small intestine, and from there further absorption of food material will occur. Here, much absorption is thought to occur directly through the wall without the need for the any kind of spatial adaptations. Right? There is no spatial adaptations. Those blood artery and venues which are spreaded over that specific mesenteries will absorb the food material. And we can consider while considering our daily fluid intake, almost 90% of our daily fluid intake is absorbed in the small intestine. Those villi, which increases the surface area of the small intestines, and it thus provides the better absorption of the food material. Absorption by the small intestine. Here, as we can see here, that villi and the microvilli, which are present inside the small intestine. And here, while considering the absorption of the small specific food material from the small intestine, it is the major portion here. The main reason why we used to have a food. Here, while considering the absorption of digested food material from the GI tract, the absorption of digested food material takes place mainly through the gastric mucosa and the mucosa at small intestine, and certain portions, that is colon also, there will be absorption of food material. Generally here, water, sodium chloride, glucose, alcohol, certain drugs, and vitamin B12 are absorbed from the gastric mucosa, as we can see here. Generally amino acids, next is monosaccharides, like that is what simple sugars, next is glycerol, and certain fatty acids are absorbed from the jejunum and the ileum. Certain water-soluble vitamins are even absorbed from the intestine. While considering colon, there are some ions and the water are absorbed from the colon itself. The sites of the further absorption for various substances. Here we can see that specific diagram. Those epithelial cells with the microvilli and the breast border, they are responsible for the absorption or the sites of the absorption. While considering third portion, after that duodenum, jejunum, third will be ileum, and it has specially been modified to perform certain functions, that is the absorption of food material. Here it constitute, again there will be a presence of those villi and microvilli. Again that villi and microvilli, what it will do, it increases the surface area for the absorption of food material, and additionally it also consists of the lacteals, that is for the absorption of fatty acids and the glycerols. While considering mechanisms, what is the mechanism that how exactly the food material will get absorbed? Here it will be, while considering water, there will be a simple diffusion method. While considering glucose and amino acids, it could be facilitated diffusion, and certain ions like for sodium, it will be active transport or the vesicle mediated transport, or even for lipids also vesicle mediated transport will be, or the active transport will be used. Next is the functions of the intestine. The major function of it, that is to pancreatic secretion, carbohydrate digestion. Next is fats deposition, digestion of the fat. Next is the digestion of proteins. Next is success entericus. So while considering pancreatic secretion, here we can see that the pH ranges could be 7.1 to 8.2. Previously, while considering chyme, which was present inside the stomach, it was around 1.5 to 2.5. Now it has turned to 7.1 to 8.2. That is because of the bile juices which was entering into the opening of the duodenum. So here this is the secretion from the exocrine part, that is while considering pancreatic secretions, because pancreas releases its own secretions into the duodenum with the help of pancreatic duct, and the pH could be on alkaline side, and these specific juices that is released from the pancreas may have a number of enzymes like mostly trypsinogen, chymotrypsinogen, carboxypeptidase, aminopeptidase, nucleases. Next is amylase, maltase, sucrase, lactase, lipase, and the esterase. Next is the next function of the small intestine, that is the digestion of the carbohydrates. While considering the amylase, here the major role will be of amylase, which generally acts on the starch and dextrin, which forms the maltose, and again further that maltose will get converted into the glucose, and the pH will be ranging in 6.7 to 6.7 to 7. Here generally pancreatic amylase may have a major role, and its action will be more rapid than the chylene. Here generally salts and the chloride ions are essential for its action, and again those salts are required. Third function, that is the digestion of fats. While considering fats digestion, it is mainly carried out by the pancreatic lipase, that is steepsin, and which could act in a slightly alkaline medium, that is or further pH may be required up to 8, and its optimum temperature could be 40 degrees Celsius, and here even bile salts which help into the emulsification of fats, right? For further fat material, emulsification will be used, and this emulsification will be with the help of emulsification, it reduces the surface tension, and thus big fat molecules, right, or those larger globules will get converted into the smaller globules. Thus, bile facilitates the digestive actions of the pancreatic lipases, and the absorption of the lipids can be possible. Next function, that is the digestion of proteins. For further, zymogens are responsible. Other than zymogens, there will be a presence of or we can consider the parts of the zymogens like trypsinogen, chymotrypsinogen, and the procarboxypeptidases, which forms the zymogen. Here, enterokinases are responsible for the major activity, and it further activates the trypsinogen into the trypsin, and further that activated trypsin will activates the chymotrypsinogen into the chymotrypsin. These enzymes generally act on the proteins, and their breakdown takes place in such a way like further proteins were there. Next is from protein it will get converted into the primary proteases. Next is secondary proteases, peptones, polypeptides, and further it will get divided into the low power polypeptides, and at last we will have a amino acids. And the further we can see here like a role of procarboxypolipeptidase, which is also activated by the trypsin, and the carboxypolipeptidase, which is formed that acts on the terminal amino acids at the end amino acids at carboxyl end of the proteins, and that will get converted into the peptides and the amino acids. And last portion, and the last important function, that is success entericus. That is what the intestinal juices, right? Here intestinal juices is secreted into the intestine, which contains the erepsin, lipases, next is amylase, sucrase, maltase, lactase. And erepsin will have a function, that is generally erepsin acts on the dipeptides and those polypeptides, which further break down them into the amino acids, that is proteins to amino acids. Intestinal lipase generally acts on those of fat material, and it converts those fatty acids, it converts those fats into the fatty acids. Whereas sucrase acts on the sucrose, maltase, on the maltose, lactase, and on lactose, and amylases that acts on the starch, and finally it will get converted into the glucose, fructose, and the galactose. Here, the last portion of it, that is large intestine. While considering the large intestine, here, as we can see here in diagram, there will be ascending colon, next is the transverse colon, and descending colon, sigmoid colon, and at last there will be a rectum and the anus. Here, while considering the small bowel, that is the intestine, that is the part is ileum. That ileum of the small intestine further merges with the large intestine, and there will be an ileocecal valve, right? Again there will be a valve, that is ileocecal valve at the junction, which generally guards the entry of food into the large intestine, that is colon. And colon, while considering their length, it could be 1.5 meter in length, and divided into the this whole part, that is cecum, ascending colon, transverse colon, descending colon, sigmoid colon, rectum, and the anus. And here generally solid material passes through the large intestine, and these are undigestible solids, or the major amount will be the composition will be fibers that cannot be further absorbed inside the body. And the major function of the large intestine, that is to absorb the water. Here vitamins K and B are again further reabsorbed with the help of water. Rectum, that is responsible for the solid wastes that exits the body. Again here there will not be a kind of those villi, as villi and the microvilli was present inside the stomach and the small intestine, but here there will be a presence of those goblet cells, right? Here there will not be any kind of villi, but goblet cells will be present. Here we can see that the functions of the colon, that is to reabsorb water, and generally while considering a day, generally 9 liters of the water will be every day, or the digestive juices will undergo reabsorption, which was previously added with the help of bile juices in duodenum. And more than 90% of water will be reabsorbed, and in certain many altered pathological conditions or altered physiological conditions may lead to the pathological conditions like diarrhea and constipation. While considering diarrhea, we can understand that the stool will be watery. It means that from large intestine the water is not absorbed, or due to certain reasons that water cannot be absorbed from the colon, and it may produce diarrhea. While constipation, in many cases of constipation, what person may have a difficulty in defecation, and that stool may be or may have a blood into it, right? Where one can understand that too much water will get absorbed from the colon. Next portion, that is the rectum. This is the last section of the colon or the large intestine, which may have a major role, that is to eliminate the feces. And here it will be, or it will have undigested materials, or we can consider like it may have a certain extracellular wastage, and that is what mainly cellulose, right? Cellulose from the plant material. And those fiber may have a rough edges, right? They may have a rough edges of the fiber, and there might be a presence of those bacteria. So there will be a masses of bacteria could be present in rectum. The functions of the large intestine, that is the major important one, that is the absorption of water and the formation of solid stool. Next could be absorption of saline, glucose, amino acids, and the certain drugs. While considering secretion function, the goblet cells are responsible for that, and here the mucus is secreted by the goblet cells of the large intestine. And the role of goblet cell is to prevent the mechanical irritation, and it acts as a lubricant, right? That specific mucus which is liberated from the goblet cells, which acts as a lubricant material, so that the defecation will have easy access, and it may reduces the alkaline reaxis, as well as it lessens the acidity of the bacterial fermentation which may be undergoing in colon. Excretion, while considering excretion, certain heavy metals are extracted from the blood directly into the colon, and they are passed with the help of feces. While considering the synthesis of vitamins, by bacteria, again there will be a presence of certain bacteria into the colon, which forms the vitamins. Colon has an established microflora, right? There will be a presence of microflora, and certain bacteria, like there will be this bacteria generally synthesizes the folic acid. Next is vitamin B12, that is cyanocobalamin, and some other vitamin B factors, or the factors of vitamin B, and they also synthesizes the vitamin K, right? So that is the role of synthesis of vitamins while considering large intestine. Next could be the microbial digestion. While considering microbial digestion, we can understand that the human body generally obtains its cytochrome pigment, that is from the dead bacterial products, and these dead bacterial products may have a microbes which present in the colon, that digest away other pathogenic microbes, and thus prevents the infection, or in other terms we can call like good bacteria, right? We can understand that what is good bacteria, which could be helpful for the the digestion of food material, and which maintains optimum concentration of bacteria inside the colon. Next is the movements. While considering movements, it follows the normal peristalsis movement, which pushes the feces forward, that is towards the rectum, and that mass peristalsis occurs into the large intestine, and this finally pushes the stool into the rectum. So these are all the functions of the large intestine. Here it is we can understand the general summary of the functions of the digestion system, so that we can revise these the role of mouth. Next is the pharynx, salivary glands. Next is esophagus. Next is the stomach, pancreas. Next is large intestine, rectum, anus, and the small intestine. The only portion remaining into it, that is liver, and that we will discuss during the accessory glands or accessory organs which could help in the digestive system, or the role of the digestive system. So this is all about the anatomy of digestive system. Thank you very much.